And there's one more key exercise that you typically want to start with when you're beginning with processing, and that's another kind of programming fundamental, which would be to say, hello mouse. So we're going to use the mouse as a way to capture some user input. So by doing so, we're not going to draw just one shape that's based on coordinates that are static, but we're going to keep drawing shapes based on the mouse position as the program is actually running. All right. So the mouse's position is an easy way to gather input from an external user. That user might be yourself or someone else if you're compiling your applet to share on the web or something similar. And this will help us to begin to develop some simple interactions. Right. So whereas before, a second ago when we drew our diagonal line, we were just drawing it once, and it was a static element that we were drawing. But processing actually allows us to program at multiple levels of complexity, and there's actually more than 3. We're going to focus on 2, basic and continuous mode. So users new to programming should begin with the basic mode to learn about the coordinate system, how to use variables and loops, which we'll be getting into in a second, before we move to continuous mode. That's the recommendation of processing. We're going to dive right into it, right? So if we were to think back to the last exercise, we were using a basic programming mode. It's used for drawing static images and learning the fundamentals of programming. Simple lines of code have direct representation in the display window. And if you were to write some code, as we see here on the left, as an example, you'd end up with a single yellow rectangle drawn in the upper left-hand corner of the display window. Right? In contrast to the static mode, or what's called basic mode, we can also use processing to be constantly updating, or in continuous mode. So the program isn't compiled once and then run once. It's compiled once and it's run continuously, updating each frame, which by default is 30 frames per second. So when we're using continuous mode, we want to break our code into 2 sections. And we're going to use setup and draw to first initialize the program, and internal to the setup function, we're going to specify things like the size of the sketchpad or the display window, its color, and things like that, and that will run once. And draw is what's called the application event loop, and it runs every frame. So if we were to try to use continuous mode to do something like draw some circles, what's actually happening is every frame, anything inside the draw structure will be run continuously, 30 times a second, right? And the nice thing about that is that it's a way for the program to be live, and we can start to begin to develop behaviors that are directly related to the user interfacing with our program. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into to the next file. So I'm going to do File New, close that guy. And this is going to be File 2, User Input. All right, and here what we want to do is implement the setup and draw structure, as well as look at how the mouse might interact with our program. All right, so in terms of our pseudocode, the top level description of what we want to do is we want to draw lines continuously from the center of the display window to the mouse position. Okay. If we were to open up the other file that we shared with you already, you'll see here that it's got some notes about setup and draw. So if you ever want to review that, that's in the This is similar information to what we had in the PowerPoint. The code is also here if you wanted to copy and paste this into your file as you're developing some of your early programs. All right, so I'll just minimize this and we can carry forward with this exercise. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to, in terms of our step-by-step pseudocode, we want to set up our setup structure. All right. Inside of that, and I'll do 4 backslashes to kind of indicate an indentation. We're going to define the size of our display window, and we're also going to define the color of the background, and that's all we're going to do in our setup. And that's just going to run once at the beginning of the program, and then whatever we put inside of the draw structure or draw loop will happen every frame. So we'll say set up our draw structure. And I'm calling it a structure because it is really fundamental to using programming in the continuous mode. So it's actually a method, just like line is a method, but it's kind of more fundamental than that. So I'm trying to define it as a kind of base structure or a base building block for us to set up our file within. Okay, so inside of the draw structure, we're going to, again, define the stroke color. And then we're going to draw a line from the center to the mouse position. Okay, so let's go through and execute our writing our actual program. So I'm going to give myself some space in between each line here. Maybe give myself some more room here in the text editor.